about once a year now, I seem to do this walkabout in the gardens here. A lot of new subscribers ask where things are located, and I just show little close-ups of things. It doesn't seem to make sense to people, so I'm at it again. I'm going to do a walkabout, and I'll stop and talk about different things along the way. Start here at the house. You can hear the roosters, no doubt. It's around 8 a.m. and I've just opened up their coops. That's a laburnum, and every year it blooms, but it's one of those things that also seems to bloom better in some years than others. Last year it didn't have very many blossoms, and this year it's absolutely beautiful. I don't know how many years I've had that growing off there in that field, but it just continues to do well. If you can see all these white blossoms down in here, those are wild blackberries. The canes are almost lethal. They have lots of thorns, and they seem to be able to reach out and grab you, but I don't have to grow cultivated blackberries. There are several patches like that on my property, and lots of areas on sort of public land where nobody cares if you pick, and I can go get more. So you can never satisfy a gardener, I guess. It's either too wet or too dry or too hot or too cold or whatever. We're still having cool weather, but things once again are very dry. I don't know. And no rain forecast for next several days either, like 10 days ahead. There's no rain in the forecast. As you can see, we're walking down past the house. So this is a lavender bed, lavender and weeds right now. Lots of blossom buds, but it won't be in bloom for a while yet. And in front of us is the 3 plum trees. And I guess you can see sort of peeking out in behind there. I planted columbine under it last year that I grew from seed, and deltoides. Deltoides is just starting to bloom. Columbines have been lovely. Weeds, as you can see, are doing well too. And that is a snowball viburnum. 3rd year, I think. It was a tiny little thing. It still isn't very large. And down that sort of alley beside the house is where the 3 coops are. This video isn't about the birds, so I won't go down and do chickens and quail, etc. Sorry about the bouncy, but when I stop, at least, it won't be so bouncy. I'm walking a plank here. I have this walkway of wide planks with roofing shingles on them for traction, because this area, when it rains, is a quagmire. But I don't really need to be on the planks right now because the ground is fairly dry here. But this is the pathway that takes you out to the hoop house and my cabin and the other gardens. Mostly vegetable gardens. The perennial areas have sort of been ignored. Oh dear, the roosters. Hopefully they will stop at some point before I finish this. But they have to announce that they're out and free every morning, and I have too many roosters. There's the hoop house. And this is the area of containers that I'm growing things in. 4 varieties of potatoes, 2 different varieties of summer squash, that parthenocarpic one, the one that is supposed to produce a fruit at every blossom, doesn't have any male blossoms. The yacon, some brassicas here, and 2 cucumber plants. Down is the patch that I'm growing squash in, and there are 4 varieties of winter squash, just starting to get some good sized leaves on them. And if you notice a difference in the leaves in the center, there are dwarf sunflowers coming up in the center there. There's also a couple of varieties of cucumbers in there as well, off in the back end of it. These potting tables or whatever. I had these squash left over in case I lost one, but they're going by. I'll be losing those soon, I guess. Just had them in case I needed them. I'm growing hollyhocks from seed. By late July, early August, I'll plant them out. They're at best a biennial or a perennial, so they won't bloom this year anyway. This is the perpetual chard, which is going to go in the hoop house where the peas are when the peas come out. And finally, I am getting some germination in the celeriac. That's been in that pot for 2 months now, and there's a few leaves down in there, quite a few little plants, so I don't know. I'll try growing them on and probably plant them in the hoop house, because I don't think think they're too slow growing to hope for anything outside here this time of year. They're just getting going. So I think we'll take a walk over to where some of the raised beds are. I've seen inside the hoop house many times. And the light's wrong right now. The sun is rising. This little narrow pathway, I have to keep almost with a machete to keep it open so I can get out here. Those are the onions and the shallots with carrots growing down the middle. The shallots in the bed to the left, onions to the right. And these are the 4 raised beds inside of a low fence to keep rabbits out. To my left there is all brassicas, plus at the back are the blue-potted peas. Further over to the left again, that bed is the butter beans and more blue-potted peas. And then I have various brassicas, and this bed directly in front of me to the right has got a row of those small white turnips and a row of radish, and the radish are ready to be picked today before they get woody. They're a good size. The turnips, well, they're the size of a large radish. I'd like them to get a little bit bigger, and I'm having problems there. I don't know. Someone has suggested that it's root maggots. I don't know what root maggots are. I guess I've never had them before anyway. This area used to be a perennial garden, and you just see what's surviving of it, I guess. I don't pay any attention to it anymore. And that up there is my red flowering horse chestnut tree. This rose started as one little plant, and this is probably, at least 15, maybe closer to 20 feet of row now. It just keeps coming up from the root. It's an old an old French rose, excuse me. Very fragrant and blooms its head off this time of year. I haven't planted foxglove in many years, but they spread and come up everywhere. So I like anything that does that. You don't have to work at it. We're back at the cabin here. I'll take you in front of it eventually. But that's my water barrel with the goldfish in it. And they have been coming out of their pipe more because there's only an inch or so of water in their pipe now, but I still see a tail sticking out of that pipe. I don't know what the idea is, but they like being up there. At the back of that perennial bed now, and to the left, these are 2 beds of garlic. And they have, at the back of them, they're just coming up, the heirloom bean called Mulched beans. I haven't been in that long, but they've germinated nicely and coming up, and they're going to hopefully grow up those trellises at the back. And here we have the other bed of garlic and more foxglove. They seem to have planted themselves a nice row here. There's one by that other bed, but there are 5, I guess, along here. Last year I think there was only 1. Must have been these little seedlings down there, though, or they wouldn't be blooming. This is my asparagus bed, and I used to grow other things in with it, and I gave up, but you see what asparagus does. Turns into those tall ferns, and they fall over, and well, it's a nuisance if you try to grow anything next to them. So this bed, I can just let it go. If they fall, they fall. These are the potatoes, no dig, and hilled up with wood shavings. 4 varieties, and I don't know how well it shows on the video, but I can look at them and see where the 4 varieties are. They're quite different. This is Linzer Delicatessen, and it stops right here. And then these shorter ones here are Pacific Russet. The ones over there that are kind of, I don't know, thinly branched or whatever, they're quite tall, but they're not as dense as the other ones. That's Nicola, a white potato. And this other very hardy looking tall bunch over in here, a Rocco, which is a red-skinned potato. But they all seem to be, I think, doing okay. I may put a little more shavings on some places where I see it isn't quite high enough, but I think they've got shavings enough right now to protect what's growing down there from the sun. And of course, everybody knows I just haven't been doing it myself much in the past, but with all of that mulch, it really retains moisture. I can dig down through that mulch. It hasn't rained in, well, light showers. We haven't had a good rain in over 2 weeks. And the soil down there where the potatoes are growing is just as moist and nice as can be. The mulch is keeping it in. And you can see probably onions growing on the outside of that row, and the other side of the potatoes on the back end has some shallots growing, so probably getting shaded out and not going to amount to much, but I had them left over, so I put them in there. Now we'll walk back to the cabin. That's the north side of the cabin, so it doesn't have any windows in it. That's the solar panel. This is I call it my killer rose. I can't believe I started that thing from a seed, probably a decade ago or more. It right now is not in bloom, but there are literally thousands upon thousands of blossom buds. I will take pictures and show it to you later when it blooms, but like that is a cluster of blossom buds there with, oh gracious, in that one little cluster there's probably 50 or more, and there's hundreds of those on the plant. The cabin in bright morning sunlight, but that's a wild grapevine, New Brunswick river grape, a native wild grapevine that I've had on my property for many years, and I propagated it with some cuttings a few years ago. This is its first year that it's going to produce some grapes, I guess. I see little blossom clusters coming on it anyway. This area is the perennial fruit and vegetable area. And I have just done some weeding so it doesn't look as bad as it usually does. To the left here is raspberries, which I planted last year. I'm no expert, as you can see, on raspberries. I didn't tie the canes up or anything, so they're sort of all laying over. But they're blooming nicely. These are the Romance series of cherries, and this one I know is called Juliet. It was the only one that bloomed. They're not supposed to require cross-pollination according to the instructions that came with it, but it is not setting any fruit. Like these little blossom things here are dried up and going to fall off. So of the blossoms that it had, there were lots of pollinators around. I think it really does require cross-pollination. There's three more, three altogether. This down here is a Saskatoon berry, and I have 5 of those. 2 years old. Last year when they arrived, they were just little cuttings, so they're growing quite rapidly. These are hascaps, and there are some hascaps on them. There's 3. There's one here, there's one in the middle, and there's another one way up there in the shade. I don't know, I'm not going to get any great crop off of them, but I'm going to get to taste some hascaps. There was 1 or 2 that was purple the other day, and I picked one, but it was very sour still, so it wasn't ripe. This is my grafted Asian pear, and I've got to get out and thin the pears on it. Not that there's a huge crop, but it's such a small tree, and you can see there's in there or not. All 4 grafts, it's grafted with 4 different kinds of pears. They all produced blossoms and pollinated this year, but such a small tree. I'm going to, like that cluster there, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, well, 4 or 5 in that cluster and more up above. Each one of those clusters I'll take down to the one largest pear, and may have to remove some clusters completely from some of the smaller branches because I do not want it to break off one of the grafts. Okay, and this is Good King Henry on the ground here. I've had 2 meals off of Good King Henry so far this spring, and it looks to me like I could probably harvest some more today. I really like it, a nice perennial green, sort of an arrow-shaped leaf, if I can get one down here. I guess I would call that arrow-shaped anyway. I think it was Elise, Joseph, who said that it is in the same family as, oh dear, lamb's quarters maybe? Anyway, on the back of the leaf there's a substance that probably isn't showing up on camera, but it's just like a very, very fine sand. And it rinses off easily under the tap before you cook it, but it's a strange thing to find on a plant. I don't know what its purpose is, but I really like the greens. They have a bit of a hint of a bitter taste, but very nice with anything like that. Anything else like that, very nice with salt and pepper. And this is one of my currants, a black currant that I just stuck in the ground from a cutting once, and it's up and growing and has lots of currants on it. But I will show you my other currant patch in a minute. Don't want this video to run on forever. This side of the cabin has another grapevine, another wild grapevine, and it's also producing some fruit this year. And this is the comfrey that I cut down to the ground about a week ago or 10 days ago. One on the end is doing much better than the other two, but they're all coming up nicely. In between, I have planted my gojis. The tag that came with them, I have one here and one the other side of this comfrey as well. The tag that came with them said that they will tolerate partial shade and like a drained, well-drained soil. Well, they get both things here except for when it rains. This is under the eave, so that the eave is out past it a bit. It won't get dumped on completely, but anyway, any soil gets wet when it rains. So that was as good a place as I could find to put them, and they seem to have transplanted okay so far. So maybe I will get a goji that comes through the winter. I'll walk back out to finish this walk off. Walking into the sun here, not good. I'll turn a bit. These are hazel trees, or filberts, or noisette, depending on who you are, I guess, when you talk about them. I had a few hazelnuts off of them last year. There are 3 altogether. This quite large one, there's one here, and there's one in behind that's still very small, but there are 2 different varieties. And I think that was a good idea accidentally. I think they needed to be cross-pollinated. I can't think of what Woody of Woody's Allotment called the process that I should do to get more catkins and more blossoms for next year. But basically it was to, he said in August, to like each end of each branch, bend it like that. Don't break it off, but just bend it. And that causes the plant to produce more catkins and more blossoms for the coming year. His was to do it in August. I presume probably in the UK that could be late August, but I think by early August sometime I'm going to go around and do that to quite a few of the branches and see if it makes any difference for next year. The fan in the hoop house is on a timer and it just came on, so that's working today. These are 4 black currant bushes. And the new growth, you can't see the berries, but there's lots of berries, so I can get some of this out of the way here. Green at this point, of course, but it's going to be a great year for black currants. One more little thing to show, and then I'll shut this down. You haven't all gone to sleep already. Out behind the hoop house here is another one of those potting tables or whatever. And I'm growing my Salanova lettuce in them. Coming along quite nicely. You can see 5 clearly, but there is a 5th one here. It's a red leaf. I'm sure it isn't showing up all that well, and it came up later than the other one, so it's smaller. Those were the seed that were left over from a year ago. I don't know, the leaves are all looking quite similar. They might be all oak leaf anyway, I guess. But here, my seed from this year, this is oak leaf, and this one is called incised. And finally, the other one is here, the 4th plant. I don't know if that's ever going to amount to anything or not. That's quite small. Depressions in here is from a cat. One of the neighborhood cats comes here, evidently, and walks along. Thankfully, so far, she hasn't used it as a toilet. More of the wild blackberries in bloom out here, so it's going to, if we get some moisture so that the berries will develop after they get pollinated here, it's going to be a great year for blackberries, wild blackberries. Well, thank you very much for watching. That's this year's little walkabout. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.